The night was pitch black, as if the sky had decided to drop a heavy curtain over the city of Ash, where thieves never sleep and the honest rest in constant anxiety. In this darkness, Sami was riding his dilapidated motorcycle, Danger, until his phone buzzed with a final order notification. His destination was the old slaughterhouse district, a remote, abandoned area surrounded by rumors like flies around a carcass. Sami hesitated. It was past 2 a.m., and the rain was falling heavily like cold needles. But the need for money was a whip lashing his back. He adjusted the food box and set off toward the unknown, unaware that his wheels were not just crossing asphalt, but the gap between his safe world and an underworld that feeds on blood.
Sami arrived at the specified address, a massive industrial building with walls eroded by moisture and time, its broken windows looking like gouged eyes staring into the void. The engine stopped, replaced by a heavy, suspicious silence broken only by the sound of rain hitting the rusty tin. Sami carried the paper bag and approached the ajar iron gate, pushing it to produce a terrifying creak that echoed through the dark building. "Delivery!" he called out with a trembling voice, but the words were swallowed by the darkness, without a response. He should have left the food and gone, but a strange curiosity, mixed with the naivete of someone who had never experienced evil, pushed him inside to look for the client. The smell inside was unbearable, a mix of rotting wet wood and a sharp metallic scent like old blood. He walked down a long corridor with bare electrical wires hanging from the ceiling and distorted graffiti on the walls. Suddenly, he heard a faint sound from a large hall at the end of the hallway, a wet thudding sound. Thud, thud, thud. The sound of a heavy knife falling on soft meat.
Sami approached, a cold shiver running down his spine like an electric current. He hid behind a rusty barrel and peeked into the hall. What he saw froze the blood in his veins. There was no hungry customer waiting for a meal. It was a scene from an earthly hell. Under a single, slowly swinging lamp that made shadows dance terrifyingly on the walls, 5 bulky men gathered around a metal butchery table. They weren't talking. They worked in silent, terrifying harmony, wearing transparent plastic aprons stained with blood from neck to toe. On the table, there was no animal carcass, but a distorted human corpse. They were cutting it calmly and professionally, as if practicing a sacred religious ritual rather than a heinous crime. Sami saw their faces. They weren't the faces of normal humans. They were expressionless, with dead, glassy eyes and skin so pale they looked as if they hadn't seen the sun in decades. One of them, seemingly the leader, held a massive cleaver, raising it and dropping it in a steady rhythm, while the others wrapped the cut parts in thick black bags.
Sami backed away, his chest tightening as if an invisible hand were squeezing it. He tried to stifle his frantic breathing, but his foot betrayed him, stepping on a piece of broken glass that made a crunching sound. Despite the sound of rain and saws, it was enough for everything in the hall to stop. The cleaver froze in midair, and the bodies went still. Then, with a unified, mechanical, terrifying motion, the 5 heads turned slowly toward the dark corner where Sami was hiding. They didn't scream or run toward him immediately. They just looked at him with those dead eyes. The leader smiled, a grin that split his face, revealing metallic teeth. Then he switched off the single lamp, plunging the place into total darkness. And here, the real horror began. Sami realized the rules of the game had changed. He was now the prey in a forest of cement and iron. He ran back through the corridor, but hit the wall in the dark. The bag fell from his hand, and food scattered on the floor. He heard heavy, calm footsteps approaching. Not running, but the confident steps of someone who knows they will catch their prey. The sound of heavy military boots striking the concrete floor was like the ticking of a death clock. Sami felt his way and entered the first open door he found, finding himself in an old cooling room. The smell here was stronger, the concentrated smell of death. He closed the door carefully and tried to stifle his gasping. It was pitch black, but he felt things hanging from the ceiling. He reached out his trembling hand to feel around. His fingers touched something cold and slimy. He pulled out his lighter and lit a small flame, discovering he was standing in a forest of corpses hanging from meat hooks, pale faces of missing people, open eyes staring at him accusingly. He almost screamed, but pressed his hand against his mouth so hard it nearly tore his skin. Tears streamed from his eyes, not out of sadness, but pure horror that strips a human of their sanity.
Outside, he heard the handle turn slowly. "We know you're here, boy." The voice was calm and raspy, as if coming from the bottom of a well. "No use hiding. Fresh meat is always tense." The door opened, and a flashlight beam swept the room. Sami cowered behind one of the hanging corpses, using the dead as a shield. He saw the killer's shadow approaching, the cleaver gleaming in the flashlight's beam. The killer was stabbing the hanging corpses one by one while whistling a terrifying nursery rhyme. He got closer, step by step, until Sami could feel the heat of the killer's body and the smell of tobacco and blood. At the moment the killer raised his hand to push aside the corpse Sami was hiding behind, the young man gathered every ounce of despair in his body. In a sudden move, he pushed the hanging corpse with all his strength toward the killer. The man lost his balance, and the cleaver fell from his hand. Sami didn't wait to see the result. He shot out of the room like an arrow, running through the branching corridors like a panicked mouse, hearing angry screams and orders to kill behind him. He no longer knew the way out. The building was a maze designed to catch souls.
Sami found himself in front of a rusty ladder leading to the roof. He climbed it with frantic speed, the rungs swaying and groaning under his weight. He reached the roof, the rain hitting him harshly, washing away his sweat with cold water. But he found himself trapped. The edge was before him, and the killers were slowly climbing the ladder behind him. He looked down. The height was dizzying, and falling meant certain death. But staying meant something worse than death, being cut up and hung in that cold room. He looked back and saw the leader emerging from the roof door, blood dripping from a wound on his forehead, his eyes burning with demonic rage. "Where will you go, little one? The party hasn't started yet," he said, advancing. Sami looked around in despair and spotted a drain pipe running down the side of the building. Without thinking, he leaped into the air, grabbing the slippery metal pipe. His body slid down with painful speed, his skin chafing against metal and rust, until he reached a large dumpster in the back alley. He fell into it with a force that broke something in his ribs. He screamed in pain, but stifled it, sinking into the foul trash, while the killers peered from the roof, searching for him with their flashlights.
He stayed there for hours, trembling from cold, pain, and terror, amidst the food scraps and waste. until he was sure they had left or given up. He crawled out of the container at dawn. His body was broken, but it was his soul that was completely shattered. He dragged himself to his motorcycle, which was still in its place, as if nothing had happened. He drove back home as the city slowly woke up. People going to work, bakeries opening. Life seemed provokingly normal. He reached his small apartment, locked all the locks, and pushed the sofa behind the door. He sat in the corner of the room, trembling, eyes fixed on the door. He thought he had escaped. He thought he was out of the nightmare. But when he took off his wet jacket, a small paper he hadn't put there fell from his pocket. It was a paper stained with a single drop of blood, written in elegant yet terrifying handwriting. "You forgot your tip. We will visit you soon to collect the meat." At that moment, Sami realized the horror hadn't ended in that building. The building now lived inside him. His normal life was over forever, replaced by a terrifying wait for a knock on the door that would be his last. The gang never forgets a face that showed fear, and now they knew where he lived. Then a silent scream erupted from his throat that no one heard. The scream of someone who had fallen into the abyss while still breathing.